Good day, beautiful people. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Kris, this is Wizard Way, and you are watching Silmarillion Saturday. This is a re-recording of Part 10, aka Chapter 14, of the Quinta Silmarillion, because I lost the footage, so we are re-streaming it today. It will probably actually be more condensed and coherent the second time around. But welcome everybody. Hopefully you have been enjoying my series of reading and reviewing the Silmarillion. So I have a beautiful 2021 copy, hardcover deluxe illustrated edition of the Silmarillion. There are illustrations in here by Ted Nesmith, some of which have not been in previous editions. So we have lots of pretty pictures to look at. In this chapter specifically, I'm not sure if we have any illustrations, but we do have an extra map, because this is of Beleriand and its realms. That is the name of the chapter, chapter 14. So we are going to cover just this chapter. It's not super long, but it's all geography. It is literally all geography. So this is where lots of people are going to get names mixed up in Tolkien's world, and that's why I'm here, because the names are really easy for me, and I've gotten very, very familiar with the maps of Middle-earth. So join me, and hopefully everyone is doing well. So just as a recap, the previous chapter was of the return of the Noldor. So we've got the Noldor finally back in Beleriand after being exiled for the kinslaying at Alqualonde. Morgoth is sending his spies everywhere. We do have Fingolfin and Maedhros being very suspicious of Morgoth, as they should be. And let's see. We finished up talking about the fire drakes of the north issuing from Angband by night, but Glaurung at this point, who is the king or prince of dragons, he is very young at this point. He's not full grown and therefore not at his full power. He will come back later on and cause an awful lot of trouble for the elves later on in the first age. But at this point in the story, he's too soft-skinned, if you will, and the elves win the battle. So Fingon wins great praise, the Noldor rejoice. It talks a little bit about the Sindar having really fair voices. Sindar, if you remember, are the elves who stayed behind in Beleriand and never crossed the ocean over to Valinor. So the Sindar are considered in general better musicians than the Noldor, with the exception being Maglor, the second son of Feyenoor. He has a voice like the sea, and he is considered the second most praised bard in Tolkien's world entirely. Hi, Kittenbit. And my cat is here. You're here early, my goodness. Alright, okay. We'll have a kitty moment, and then we'll start reading. Hi, Kittenbit. You ignore me all day, and then I start recording, and you decide you've got to be here. Come on. Thank you, good girl. There she is. She's super cute. Are you gonna stay put? Are you gonna be a good girl? I'm gonna make it easier for you by making it harder for you to jump on my desk. Okay. So let's get started, shall we? So just to sum up what I was saying, Maglor is considered the second best bard in all of Middle-earth, the entire history of Middle-earth. The only one who beats him is Daeron the Dark, who is a Sindar elf who lives in Doriath. And oddly, the fates of Daeron and Maglor are actually pretty similar, which is why I used to write a lot of fan fiction about them. I am one of those people, forgive me. The singers, exactly. Anybody who's on my TikTok channel, please head over to my YouTube channel. That's where I need the minutes watched, so if you don't mind clicking over there, I really appreciate it. Support me on YouTube. And that's really why I'm re-recording this anyway. My hair's gonna be completely different for this part. My Govanen Melonin. Welcome, Annie. Okay. Shall we get started? So, once again, there will be maps. There will be maps this time. And the maps are kind of important. So, lots of geography to come. Chapter 14 of Beleriand and its Realms. This is the fashion of the lands into which the Noldor came, in the north of the western regions of Middle-earth, in the ancient days. And here also is told of the manner in which the chieftains of the Eldar held their lands and the leaguer upon Morgoth after the Dagor Aglareb, the third battle in the Wars of Beleriand. Remember, the Dagor Aglareb is the glorious battle. That's what Aglareb means. So this is a big victory for the elves, so they're feeling pretty good right now. In the north of the world, Melkor had in the ages past reared Ered Engrin, the Iron Mountains, as a fence to his citadel in Autumno. And they stood upon the borders of the regions of everlasting cold, in a great curve from east to west. Behind the walls of Ered Engrin, in the west, where they bent back... oh my gosh. Oh, great start we're off to. Behind the walls of Ered Engrin in the west, where they bent back northwards, Melkor built another fortress, as a defense against assault that might come from Valinor. And when he came back to Middle-earth, as has been told, he took up this abode in the endless dungeons of Angband, the Hells of Iron. For in the war of the powers of the Valar, in their haste to overthrow him in his great stronghold of Autumno, did not wholly destroy Angband, nor search out all its deep places. Beneath Ered Engrin, he made a great tunnel which issued south of the mountains, and there he made a mighty gate. But above this gate, and behind it even to the mountains, he piled the thunderous towers of Thangorodrim, that were made of the ash and slag of his subterranean furnaces, and the vast refuse of his tunnelings. So these are man-made mountains, basically, or Vala-made mountains. They were black and desolate and exceedingly lofty, and smoke issued from their tops, dark and foul upon the northern sky. Before the gates of Angband, filth and desolation spread southward for many miles over the wide plain of Ardgalan. But after the coming of the sun, rich grass arose there, and while Angband was besieged and its gates shut, there were green things even among the pits and broken rocks before the doors of hell. To the west of Thangorodrim lay Hisilome, land of mist, for so it was named by the Noldor in their own tongue because of the clouds that Morgoth sent thither during their first encampment. Heathlam it became in the tongue of the Sindar that dwelt in those regions. Keep in mind, Heathlam comes into play an awful lot, so we will be taking a look at a map so you guys can see what we're talking about here. It was a fair land while the siege of Angband lasted, although its air was cool and winter there was cold. In the west it was bounded by Ered Lomin, the echoing mountains, that marched near the sea, and in the east and south by the great curve of Ered Wethrin, the shadowy mountains that looked across Ardgalan and the Vale of Sirion. Before we move further, I'm going to bring the map out. I think this is a good place to pause. Alright, here we go. are typically a couple maps included with Tolkien's books. This one in particular has two maps. One of them is inside the book. It's on one of the pages. It has the realms of Beleriand, and in red ink it shows the names of the elves that rule those regions in general at the beginning of the first stage, once the elves spread out a little bit. But this is the main map of Beleriand, and so the region that we're talking about right now is Heathlam. And I will zoom in, but here is, well, on this map it's called Anthauglith. That name change happens later, but it is Ardgallen. Ardgallen are the green fields. It is the green land. Anthauglith is the land of choking ash, so you can kind of tell ahead of time that things are not going to go well in this region. But just north of Anthauglith or Ardgallen are the gates into Morgoth's Realm. So Thangorodrim are three particularly large lofty peaks that we just described, and Angband is the name of the general realm. So Angband is the stronghold of Morgoth in the north. So a couple areas that we've been looking at here. Let's zoom in. So here is Heathlam. Heathlam is basically Land of Mists. Heath you actually hear later on in Hithaeglir, the Misty Mountains. So Land of Mists is Heathlam. It's relatively northern in the continent, so you're going to end up with a lot of cold, harsh weather, and because it's misty, you get that wind chill, right? The dew point is going to mess with you. It's going to feel even colder there. But we were talking a couple of different terms. Ered Wethrin are the mountains here, the shadowy mountains, and Ered Wethrin actually curves all the way down here. So this is a very long mountain range. It starts as north-south, and then it curves westward and goes east-west. So there, Heathlam is like the larger area here, and then we will get into these smaller subsections of Heathlam. But Ered Lomin are the echoing mountains, and those are on the western banks here. So again, if you are watching on TikTok, please head over to my YouTube channel where you can actually see the maps, because I have an overhead cam. So when the elves first arrive, they tended to be in this area here. And they passed into Heathlam. And from there they go over the mountains and go forth to the various other areas of Beleriand. But just so you guys get a picture in your head, we've got Ered Lomin, and then we have the very long Ered Wethrin. And those basically provide the borders of this northern area called Heathlam. And so it did say that past Ered Wethrin, you see Ardgallen, which are the really large, vast green fields leading up to Thangorodrim in the north. But also they mention Tol Sirion, or the Vale of Sirion. Sirion is the name of the big river in this part of Middle-earth, so Tol Sirion is the Isle of Sirion, which is in the pass or Vale of Sirion. And I'll zoom out for a moment just so you can see how big this river is. It's quite large. Alright. So Aethel Sirion is where the beginning of this river starts. So we have Aethel Sirion, it passes down here through the Vale of Sirion. Tol Sirion is a island in that vale, and then it continues southward. And it goes, and it goes, and it goes. So it passes Doriath, it passes all of these other regions, until you finally get all the way down to the Bay of Balar, and the Isle of Balar. Gotta roll those R's. Balar. I try. I really do try. So it's a very long river. Sir means, like, river. So Sirion is like the big river. It is the big river. The river, if you will. Alright, so hopefully that gives you a bit of a visual for Heathlam. Let's continue from there. Okay. Shall we continue? This is Friday. I'm so confused. I know. This is a re-recording, okay? This is a re-recording of Chapter 14, which is part 10 of my series of reading and reviewing the Silmarillion. So I apologize for the confusion. It's gonna make sense for everybody else watching all of the readings all the way through. I'm still doing Silmarillion Saturday tomorrow. We're just gonna be jumping way ahead from here. We'll actually be finishing up the Quinta Silmarillion next live stream, so tomorrow morning. But let's return to where we are here. Okay, so the great curve of Ered Wethrin, the shadowy mountains that looked across Ardgallen and the Vale of Sirion. Fingolfin and Fingon, his son, held Heathlam, and the most part of Fingolfin's folk dwelt in Mithrim, about the shores of the Great Lake. To Fingon was assigned Dor Lomin, that lay to the west of the mountains of Mithrim, but their chief fortress was at Eithel Sirion in the east of Ered Wethrin, whence they kept watch upon Ardgallen. So it's basically a watchtower. Eithel Sirion is... No, it was Eithel Sirion. I was right. Eithel Sirion is like a watchtower that they keep right where the river starts up in the mountains. But because it's on the eastern side of that mountain range, they can keep a really good watch over Ardgallen, the big fields in front of Thangorodrim. You're dressed kind of like an elf today? Awesome. Okay. So Eithel Sirion is their chief fortress east of Ered Wethrin, whence they kept watch upon Ardgallen, and their cavalry rode upon that plain even to the shadow of Thangorodrim, for from few their horses had increased swiftly, and the grass of Ardgallen was rich and green. Of those horses many of the sires came from Valinor, and they were given to Fingolfin by Maedhros in atonement of his losses, for they had been carried by ship to Losgard. So as a quick reminder, the Feyenoorians crossed over the ocean in the ships of the Teleri, but instead of sending the ships back to bring Fingolfin and all of the others, Feyenoor had the ships burned. Class act. Feyenoor had the ships burned, and therefore Fingon, who was Maedhros' best friend, had to take the arduous journey over the Helcaraxe, the grinding ice in the north. So they had to basically take the Bering Strait to get from Russia to Alaska. It's not a good time. Not a good time for the elves. So in atonement for that, Maedhros basically says, I'm really, really sorry. All of those beautiful horses that we brought from Valinor, you can have them. So Fingon gets beautiful, beautiful horses. West of Dor Lomin, beyond the echoing mountains, which south of the Firth of Drengist marched inland, lay Nevrast, that signifies the hither shore in the Sindarin tongue. That name was given at first to all of the coastlands south of the Firth, but afterwards only to the land whose shores lay between Drengist and Mount Taras. There for many years was the realm of Turgon the Wise, son of Fingolfin, bounded by the sea, and by Ered Lomin, and by the hills which continued the walls of Ered Wethrin westward, from Ivrin to Mount Taras, which stood upon a promontory. By some Nevrast was held to belong rather to Beleriand than to Heathlam, for it was a milder land, watered by the wet winds from the sea, and sheltered from the cold north winds that blew over Heathlam. It was a hollow land, surrounded by mountains and great coast cliffs higher than the plains behind. And no river flowed thence. And there was a great mare in the midst of Nevrast with no certain shores, being encircled by wide marshes. Linaiwen was the name of that mare, because of the multitude of birds that dwelt there, of such as love tall reeds and shallow pools. At the coming of the Noldor, many of the Grey Elves lived in Nevrast near to the coasts, and especially about Mount Taras in the southwest. For to that place Ulmo and Osse had been wont to come in days of old. All that people took Turgon for their lord. And the mingling of the Noldor and the Sindar came to pass soonest there, and Turgon dwelt long in those halls that he named Vinyamar under Mount Taras beside the sea. Vinyamar. Under Mount Taras beside the sea. And so this is another good opportunity to show the map. We're going to be hitting the map very frequently, so bear with me. Alright, bringing up the map again. Okay. So we just talked about a couple of the distinctions here of Mithrim, Dorlomin, and Nevrast. So Nevrast, the upper border of Nevrast, is the Firth of Drengist. And south it is Ered Wethrin, all the way to Mount Taras, and that is where they have Vinyamar, which is Turgon's dwelling. Let me bring up the other map that we have, because this is a great opportunity to show that off. So this is the map that is provided inside the book itself. So you'll see that, hopefully you can see on the live stream, that some of the names there are in red. Those are the, pardon me, those are the ruler names for all of the elves that are, ruling the various areas of Beleriand. Thank you so much for the sub, Josh. Thank you. Oh, and Kendall as well. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the subs. I appreciate that over on YouTube. Remember to turn on the little bell so you get notified when I'm actually going live. You can test it tomorrow morning, because I will be live tomorrow morning. So, Heathlam is the general area given to Fingolfin, primarily around Mithrim and this lake here. Fingon, which is Fingolfin's eldest son, gets Dorlomin, and Turgon, his second eldest son, gets Nevrast. So this kind of goes... this is the line of the kingship right now, because the kingship was passed eventually from the Feyenoorians to Fingolfin. So we've got Fingolfin. The next of kin for the kingship is Fingon, his eldest son, and then Turgon. So Mithrim, Dorlomin, Nevrast. It does get easier with time, I promise. It just takes practice. What chapter are we on? This is chapter 14. Chapter 14. We're going backwards at the moment. I realize this is not in order if you've been following me. It's because I lost the footage for this particular chapter, and therefore I have to re-record it. But so that's the northwestern section of Beleriand. We can move on from there. Trying to keep things organized. Okay, where was I? Okay, we just talked about Vinyamar. under Mount Taras beside the sea. So for some people, they considered Nevrast, that area that was to the far west. Some of them consider it to be part of Beleriand rather than part of Heathlam, because it doesn't have as harsh of weather. And it's close to the sea, so it's kind of, by some, considered to be part of the Falas. Falas meaning seashore. Okay. I tend to sit on my feet, and therefore my feet are falling asleep. Okay, let's continue. South of Ardgalan, the great highland named Dorthonion stretched for 60 leagues from west to east. Great pine forests it bore, especially on its northern and western sides. By gentle slopes from the plain it rose to a bleak and lofty land, where lay many tarns at the feet of bare tors, whose heads were higher than the peaks of Ered Wethrin, but southward, where it looked towards Doriath, it fell suddenly in dreadful precipices. From the northern slopes of Dorthonion, Angrod and Aegnor, sons of Finarfin, looked out over the fields of Ardgalan, and were the vassals of their brother Finrod, lord of Nargothrond. Their people were few, for the land was barren, and the great highlands behind were deemed to be a bulwark that Morgoth would not lightly seek to cross. Between Dorthonion and the shadowy mountains there was a narrow vale, whose sheer walls were clad with pines, but the vale itself was green, for the river Sirion flowed through it, hastening towards Beleriand. Finrod held the pass of Sirion, and upon the isle of Tol Sirion, in the midst of the river, he built a mighty watchtower, Minas Tirith. But after Nargothrond was made, he committed that fortress mostly to the keeping of Orodreth, his brother. So I did mention the river Sirion, and Tol Sirion is the island within that river as it passes through these two mountainsides. Interesting note there that the name of this place is Minas Tirith. This is the original Minas Tirith, the Minas Tirith of the First Age, which was a dwelling created by the elves. Hello, stranger. Welcome, rookie. Thank you for being here. Definitely head over to my YouTube channel if you can. The link is in my bio. You guys will be able to see the maps, at least. Okay, let's see. Okay, once again, I'm changing the scene a lot. We might just stay on the map and I'll just continue reading with the map still visible. Let's do that. Okay. So let me pull out the map. And this way, hopefully you guys can keep an eye on the actual map as we go through this. So we just mentioned Dorthonion, which is this highland area. So it starts out with relatively easy slopes at the north, leading into Ardgalan, but then once it reaches this area here, Ered Gorgoroth, really sheer cliffs right down into the space leading into Doriath. So Doriath is the main forested area in Beleriand, home to King Elu Thingol, aka Elwë, and Melian is his wife, the Maya. So this whole area is protected by the Girdle of Melian. But we have this really dangerous plain in between Doriath, which is protected, and Ered Gorgoroth, or Dorthonion. It's later called Taur Nufuin, which is Forest of Shadow. Forest of shade. Dark shade. Oh, thank you so much for coming over from TikTok. I appreciate it. Alright. So we just mentioned the Pass of Sirion and Tol Sirion, which is right there. It's a tiny little dot. But it's right there, and on that island is Minas Tirith, the original Minas Tirith. Okay. Now the great and fair country of Beleriand lay on either side of the mighty river Sirion, renowned in song, which rose at Aethel Sirion and skirted the edge of Ardgallan ere he plunged through the pass, becoming ever fuller with the streams of the mountains. Thence he flowed south for 130 leagues, gathering the waters of many tributaries, until with a mighty flood he reached his many mouths and sandy delta in the Bay of Balar. So all the way down to here. All the way down to the Bay of Balar. And following Sirion from north to south, there lay upon the right hand in West Beleriand the forest of Brethiel, between Sirion and Teglin, and then the realm of Nargofrond between Teglin and Narog. And the river Narog rose in the falls of Ivrin, in the southern face of Dorlomin. Let me zoom up here. So we're talking here. So this is Brethiel. We have Ivrin. Those are the waterfalls that they're talking about along the mountains of Dorlomin. And this is the river Narog. Okay, so, and the river of Narog rose in the falls of Ivrin in the southern face of Dorlomin, and flowed some 80 leagues ere he joined Sirion in Nan Tathrin, the land of willows. South of Nan Tathrin was a region of meads filled with many flowers, where few folk dwelt, and beyond lay the marshes and isles of reed about the mouths of Sirion, and the sands of the delta empty of all living things save birds of the sea. So that's down here. So this is Nan Tathrin, where you have the river Narog meeting the river Sirion. Okay. But the realm of Nargothrond extended also west of Narog to the river Nenning, that reached the sea at Eglarest, and Finrod became the overlord of all the elves of Beleriand between Sirion and the sea, save only in the Falas. There dwelt those of the Sindar who still loved ships, and Círdan, the shipbuilder, was their lord. But between Círdan and Finrod there was friendship and alliance, and with the aid of the Noldor, the havens of Brithombar and Eglarest were built anew. Behind their great walls they became fair towns and harbors with quays and piers of stone. Upon the cape west of Eglarest, Finrod raised the tower of Barad Nimras to watch the western sea, though needlessly as it proved, for at no time ever did Morgoth essay to build ships or to make war by sea. Water all his servants shunned, and to the sea none would willingly go nigh, save in dire need. With the aid of the elves of the havens, some of the folk of Nargothrond built new ships, and they went forth and explored the great Isle of Balar, thinking there to prepare a last refuge if evil came. But it was not their fate that they should ever dwell there. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Alright, so really quickly I want to show off this map again, with all of the names, because we're talking about Nargothrond, which is right here, and this entire area, everything west of Sirion, so West Beleriand, is basically ran by Finrod. You will note that Finrod is one of the most loved of all of the Noldor. Everybody loves this guy. The dwarves love this guy. The green elves of Assyrian love this guy. Mortal men love this guy. Everybody loves this guy. He's a really good king. I hear you. I hear you, kitten. I see you behind me. So everything until we reach the Falas, which is basically just the seashore here, and all of that area is run by Círdan. So Brythembar and Eglarist are the two ports in this area. Luckily, the Falas doesn't really get attacked ever by Morgoth. Early on, he tried to come at Drengist when we first had the elves returning to Beleriand, but because of the echoing mountains, they could hear that reinforcements were on the way, and they lost that battle. The orcs lost that battle. So that gives us now all of this western Beleriand plus Dorthonion, which we've discussed. So Angrod and Aegnor, who are Finrod's brothers. Finrod and Galadriel's brothers. They tend to stay around Dorthonion because from these hills they can look across Ardgallen to where Thangorodrim and Angband are. So they keep watch over all of those fields. Same with Aethelsirion, which is the main stronghold of Fingolfin. So they've got a really good vantage point here. Now, it says Turgon here in Nevrast, and then you'll notice it says Turgon down here as well. That happens later. Turgon eventually moves from Nevrast to found Gondolin, which is the hidden city, and we'll get into that later. So let's continue. So we've got West Beleriand. On this map you can see the Falas. It's really just this area along the coastline. And the elves of Nargothrond do build ships and travel all the way down to explore the Bay of Balar and the Isle of Balar here. Which they think, oh, we'll make like a final last-ditch effort stronghold here, just in case. But unfortunately that never happens, and we'll get into that in later chapters. Because, spoiler alert, all these realms die. The only reason we already know this, though, is because we've seen the map of Middle-earth in the Third Age, right? We've seen the map in Lord of the Rings. In Lord of the Rings, the coastline is at Ered Luin, the Blue Mountains, or Ered Lindon. So this mountain range ends up being right on the coastline of the map of Middle-earth in the Third Age. So we kind of already know, well, what happened to all of this? Where did all this go? We'll find that out. We'll find that out by reading the Silm. So don't get too attached, is what I'm saying. Thus, the realm of Finrod was the greatest by far, though he was the youngest of the great lords of the Noldor, Fingolfin, Fingon, and Maedhros, and Finrod Felagund. Excuse you, kitten. Move. Move, please. I love you. Move. Thank you. I swear my cats are gonna rip all my maps to shreds, just jumping up and down from my desk. Okay, she settled. Good. I'm like, quick, continue. Alright, where were we? Okay, so the realm of Finrod was greatest by far, even though he was the youngest of the great lords of the Noldor. Fingolfin, Fingon, and Maedhros, and Finrod Felagund. But Fingolfin was held overlord of all the Noldor, and Fingon after him, though their own realm was but the northern land of Heathlam. Yet their people were the most hardy and valiant, most feared by the orcs and most hated by Morgoth. Pardon me. Upon the left hand of Sirion lay East Beleriand, at its widest 100 leagues from Sirion to Gallion, and the borders of Osiriand, and first between Sirion and Mindeb lay the empty land of Dimbar, under the peaks of the Chrysaegrim, abode of eagles. Between Mindeb and the upper waters of Iskalduin lay the no-land of Nan Dungorthib. And that region was filled with fear, for upon its one side the power of Melian fenced the north march of Doriath, but upon the other side the sheer precipices of Ered Gorgoroth, the mountains of terror, fell down from high Dorthonion. So that is this area right here. So we've got this empty area of Dimbar, leading from the Chrysaegrim, the mountains where the eagles dwell, and then Nan Dungorthib, which is this empty area between Ered Gorgoroth, those really sheer precipices, and the girdle of Melian around Doriath. So we're slowly making our way east from the west. And it did mention really quickly the river names. Pardon me. So Mindeb is here, bordering Dimbar, and then Esgalduin is here. So we just went from Dimbar across Mindeb through Nandungorthib to Esgalduin. I know, it's so many names, But we can do this. We can do this, guys. I have faith in you. We've done it before. This is a re-recording. Thither, as was earlier told, Ungoliant had fled from the whips of the Balrogs, and there she dwelt a while, filling the ravines with her deadly gloom. And there still, when she had passed away, her foul offspring lurked and wove their evil nets. And the thin waters that spilled from Ered Gorgoroth were defiled and perilous to drink, for the hearts of those that tasted them were filled with shadows of madness and despair. All living things else shunned that land, and the Noldor would pass through Nandungorthib only at great need, by paths near the borders of Doriath, and furthest from the haunted hills. That way was made long before, in the time ere Morgoth returned to Middle-earth, and if one fared upon it, he came eastwards to Esgalduin, where still there stood in the days of the siege the stone bridge of Iant Yaur. That means old bridge. Iant Yaur means old bridge. Thence he passed from Dor Dinen, the Silent Land, and crossing the Arosiach, which signifies the fords of Aros, came to the north marches of Beleriand, where dwelt the Sons of Feyenoor. So we've basically... I'm going to zoom in just a little more. So here is the dotted line that notes the path that we're talking about, that most people take. Very close to Doriath and very far away from the peaks. Okay? Iant Yaur is the old bridge here. And then Dor Dinen, the Silent Land. Arosiach, which are the passes of Aros, because this is the river Aros. And then we reach the lands where the Sons of Feyenoor are going to dwell. So we'll show that off after we cover who is where. So I'll bring back the other map in a minute. Southward lay the guarded woods of Doriath, abode of Thingol, the hidden king, into whose realm none passed save by his will. Its northern and lesser part, the forest of Neldoreth, was bounded east and south by the dark river Esgalduin, which bent westward in the midst of the land. And between Aros and Esgalduin lay the denser and greater woods of Region. Upon the southern bank of Esgalduin, where it turned westward towards Sirion, were the caves of Menegroth, and all Doriath lay east of Sirion save for a narrow region of woodland between the meeting of Teglin and Sirion, and the mares of Twilight. By the people of Doriath this wood was called Nivrim, the West March. Great oak trees grew there, and it also was encompassed within the girdle of Melian, so that some portion of Sirion which she loved in reverence of Ulmo should be wholly under the power of Thingol. So we're talking this area here. We've got the river Aros, we've got the forest region of Region, and then Nivrim is right here. So this area here is within the girdle of Melian, but the forest of Brethiel is not. So that's a good distinction to make. So Nivrim is considered part of Doriath. In the southwest of Doriath, where Aros flowed into Sirion, lay great pools and marshes on either side of the river, which halted there in its course and strayed in many channels. Move this up a little bit. There we go. So we're talking about this area here. That region was named Eilin Uyal, the Twilight Mares, for they were wrapped in mists, and the enchantment of Doriath lay over them. Now all the northern part of Beleriand sloped southward to this point, and then for a while was plain, and the flood of Sirion was stayed, but south of Eilin Uyal the land fell suddenly and steeply, and all the lower fields of Sirion were divided from the upper fields by this fall, which to one looking from the south northward appeared as an endless chain of hills, running from Eglrarest beyond Narog in the west to Amon Ereb in the east, within far sight of Gallion. So this is a very long group of hills here. Narog came through these hills in a deep gorge, and flowed over rapids but had no fall, and on its western bank the land rose into the great wooded highlands of Taur and Faroth. So we're talking about this area here. Taur and Faroth. Lost my spot. There it is. On the west side of this gorge, where the short and foaming stream Ringwil tumbled headlong into Narog from the high Faroth, Finrod established Nargothrond. But some 25 leagues east of the gorge of Nargothrond, Sirion fell from the north in a mighty fall below the mares. And then he plunged suddenly underground into great tunnels that the weight of his falling waters delved, and he issued again 3 leagues southward with great noise and smoke, through rocky arches at the foot of the hills, which were called the Gates of Sirion. So that area we're talking about is right here. So Eilin Uyal, and then the falls push the river underground for a short stint there, 3 leagues. And then you have the Gates of Sirion at the bottom, where it comes out again. Got it? I recognize that there is an awful lot of Elvish here. Okay. So we've gotten to the Gates of Sirion. This dividing fall was named Andram. Andram, the long wall, from Nargothrond to Ramdal, the wall's end, in East Beleriand. we see Andram and Ramdal. Ramdal is the last hill on the east side. And then Amon Ereb is over here. But in the east it became ever less sheer, for the Vale of Gelion sloped steadily southward, and Gelion had neither fall nor rapids throughout his course, but was ever swifter than was Sirion. Between Ramdal and Gelion there stood a single hill of great extent and gentle slopes, but seeming mightier than it was, for it stood alone, and that hill was named Amon Ereb. Upon Amon Ereb died Denethor, lord of the Nandor, that dwelt in Osiriand, who marched to the aid of Thingol against Morgoth in those days when the orcs first came down in force and broke the starlit peace of Beleriand. And upon that hill Maedhros dwelt after the great defeat, which we haven't talked about yet. Foreshadowing. So Maedhros dwells there after the great defeat. But south of the Andram, between Sirion and Gelion, was a wild land of tangled forest in which no folk went, save here and there a few dark elves wandering. Taur Imduinath it was named, the forest between the rivers. So that is the large wild land here. So now we've covered this southern, eastern part of Beleriand. And here is the river Gelion. And it's a pretty long river as well. Come on, zoom out. There we go. So it starts all the way up here. And it doesn't have any falls, it doesn't have any rapids, but it's a faster flowing river, which is kind of important to keep in mind. But that's the Gelion. So the three main rivers that you'll see referred to an awful lot are going to be Narog, which is this river here, Sirion, which is the long river here, and then Gelion, which is the long river here. So those are the three main north to south rivers in Beleriand. Hopefully that helps you guys visualize what we're talking about here. So Gelion actually continues southward, right off the map. But Amon Ereb is where Denethor, who originally this was not Denethor from Lord of the Rings. Denethor was the name of the leader of the Nandor elves. Those are the elves, sect of the Teleri elves, that initially didn't cross Ered Luin. So they were living in the region that later on is called Eregion. So that open place, it's where the Shire is, that whole open space before you get to the Misty Mountains, that's where the Nandor stopped on the Great Journey. They just decided to stay there for a while. Eventually, a sect of the Nandor decided to come over the mountains at last, and when they did, they reached Osiriand. So Denethor was the king of those elves, and they're called the Lyquindi, or the Green Elves. So Osiriand is their area. Denethor came to Thingol's aid when the orcs first came down out of Angband, but he died in the struggle, and Amon Ereb is where he was buried. This burying elves at high places is pretty common. You'll see it as a bit of a recurring theme. Alright, so now we're going to be talking a little bit about the Gelion River. Give me a second to adjust here. Okay. So let's talk Gelion. Gelion was a great river, and he rose in two sources and had at first two branches, Little Gelion that came from the hill of Himring, and Greater Gelion that came from Mount Rerir, which is impossible for me to say, R-E-R-I-R. Rerir. Too many R's. From the meeting of his arms he flowed south for 40 leagues before he found his tributaries, and before he found the sea, he was twice as long as Sirion, though less wide and full. For more rain fell in Heathlam and Dorthonion, whence Sirion drew his waters, than in the east. From Ered Luin flowed the 6 tributaries of Gallion. So we're going to talk about these rivers here. Let me zoom in. There we go. So we mentioned the Little Gallion and the Greater Gallion. So Mount Rerir is here, and Himring is here. So that gives us our 2 little rivers that join to create the Gallion. And now we're going to hit all of these tributaries from Ered Luin, the Blue Mountains. Okay, from Ered Luin flowed the 6 tributaries of Gallion. Askar, that was after named Rathloriel, Thalos, Legolin, Brilthor, Dwylwyn, and Adurant, swift and turbulent streams falling steeply from the mountains. And between Askar in the north and Adurant in the south, and between Gallion and Ered Luin lay the far green country of Osiriand, the land of 7 rivers. So the land of 7 rivers because there are 6 tributaries here, and then the 7th being the Gallion itself. So we've got the river Askar. So again, we're gonna cover the names of them again. Askar, Thalos, Legolin, Brilthor, Dwylwyn, and Adurant. Gotta love Elvish names. The ones that will most often come up are going to be the Gallion itself and the river Askar. Okay. Now at a point nearly midway in its course, the streams of Adurant divided and then joined again, and the island that its waters enclosed was named Tol Gallen, the Green Isle. There Beren and Luthien dwelt after their return. Again, foreshadowing, we will hit Beren and Luthien in a later chapter. I believe they are chapter 19. In Osiriand dwelt the Green Elves, in the protection of their rivers, for after Sirion, Ulmo loved Gallion above all the waters of the western world. The woodcraft of the elves of Osiriand was such that a stranger might pass through their land from end to end and see none of them. They were clad in green in spring and summer, and the sound of their singing could be heard even across the waters of Gallion, wherefore the Noldor named that country Lindon, the land of music. And the mountains beyond they named Ered Lindon, for they first saw them from Osiriand. So Ered Lindon, aka Ered Luin. East of Dorthonion, the marches of Beleriand were most open to attack, and only hills of no great height guarded the Vale of Gallion from the north. So let's zoom up here really quickly. So you can see there's sort of this open area here, and that's not good. That's not good defensively, right? In that region, upon the march of Maedhros, and in the lands behind, dwelt the Sons of Feyenoor with many people, and their riders passed often over the vast northern plain, Lothlan the wide and empty, east of Ardgallen, lest Morgoth should attempt any sortie towards East Beleriand. The chief citadel of Maedhros was upon the hill of Himring the Evercold. That's what Himring means. So you can kind of see that right here. It's the hill that's taller than the others. So the hill of Himring the Evercold, and that was wide-shouldered, bare of trees, and flat upon its summit, surrounded by many lesser hills. Between Himring and Dorthonion, there was a pass exceedingly steep upon the west, and that was the pass of Aglon. And that was the pass of Aglon, and was a gate unto Doriath. And a bitter wind blew ever through it from the north. But Celegorm and Curufin fortified Aglon, and held it with great strength, and all the land of Himlad, southward between the river Aros, that rose in Dorthonion, and his tributary Kellon, that came from Himring. So, talking about the Callian River here. So this is the area of Himlad. The pass of Aglon is right here. So Celegorm and Curufin tend to be right here. Maedhros tends to be on Himring. And once again, I'll show you the map with all of all the elves' names on it. So we're talking about this area now. You can see Himlad, we have Celegorm and Curufin, because they handle this pass right here. Maedhros is on Himring, and we'll get to this in a moment. But past Lothlin, we have Maglor and Caranthir, and then southward we have Amrod and Amras. So let's cover those really quickly. Between the arms of Gallion was the ward of Maglor, and here in one place the hills failed altogether. There it was that the orcs came into East Beleriand before the third battle. Therefore the Noldor held strength of cavalry in the plains at that place, and the people of Caranthir fortified the mountains to the east of Maglor's Gap. So they call that area Maglor's Gap, where just the hills just stop entirely, and then Caranthir goes eastward from there. There Mount Rerir, and about it many lesser heights, stood out from the main range of Ered Lindon westward. And in the angle between Rerir and Ered Lindon there was a lake, shadowed by mountains on all sides save the south. That was Lake Helevorn, deep and dark. And beside it Caranthir had his abode. But all the great land between Gallion and the mountains, and between Rerir and the river Askar, was called by the Noldor Thar Gallion, which signifies the land beyond Gallion, or Dor Caranthir, the land of Caranthir. And it was there that the Noldor first met the dwarves. But Thargelion was before called by the Grey Elves Talath Hrunen, the East Vale. Thus the Sons of Feyenoor under Maedhros were the lords of East Beleriand, but their people were in that time mostly in the north of the land, and southward they rode only to hunt in the greenwoods. But there Amrod and Amras had their abode, and they came seldom northward while the siege lasted. And there also other of the elf lords would ride at times even from afar, for the land was wild but very fair. Of these Finrod Felagund came most often, for he had great love of wandering, and he came even into Assyriand and won the friendship of the Green Elves. But none of the Noldor went ever over Ered Lindon while their realm lasted, and little news and late came into Beleriand of what passed in the regions of the east. And thus ends chapter 14. So it's not a very long chapter, but it covers an awful lot of territory, and it's nothing but geography. It's names of people and places. Oh, I'm glad you like my shirt, thank you. It is my Sauron is bisexual shirt. The text on the inside of the ring here is Celebrimanad, which is silver gifting. The relationship name for fans of Celebrimbor Anatar fanfiction. So I'm a geek, and I put that detail in there because I love that ship. Alright, so one more quick look at the map with the names here. So we have Maedhros. Maedhros is on Himring. We have the Gap of Maglor. And then past that we have Mount Rerir. Too many R's, I swear. And that has the Lake Helavorn, which we can see on this map. So, Rerir. Rerir is here, and then Lake Helavorn is surrounded by mountains except on the south. And this is where Caranthir lives, for the most part. Though he kind of claims all of Thargelion. But they mentioned briefly that Thargelion is where we encountered the dwarves. We as in the elves. The elves encountered the dwarves for the first time. Because of Mount Dolmed. And on the far side of Ered Lindon or Ered Luin, we have Belagost and Nogrod. Belagost and Nogrod are the two main dwellings of the dwarves in this part of the world. But the dwarves help out when constructing the different realms of the elves too. We'll see that later as well. When we talk more about Doriath, we mention when we talk about Doriath, Menegroth was constructed by the dwarves, and Nargothrond was also constructed by the dwarves. So these great elven cities were really constructed by the dwarves. Probably designed by the elves, but dwarves... It sounds weird to say they like hard labor, but, you know, their passion lies in mining and crafting, and so... I'm sure the elves were right there with them, not just letting the dwarves do all the work, but those two realms, both of them were constructed by the dwarves. So that is the land of Beleriand and all of its realms. So just to review, Heathlam, this is where Fingolfin and his kids are. So Finrod ends up here. It's not Finrod, Fingon, oh my gosh. Fingon ends up in Dorlomin, and Turgon ends up in Nevrast. That eventually changes when he founds Gondolin, but that's a ways off. Finrod, the eldest son of Finarfin, ends up in Nargothrond. Before Nargothrond is founded, he makes Tolsirion into Minas Tirith. So Minas Tirith is where Finrod starts, and then he eventually moves down to Nargothrond, which is also a hidden realm, much like Gondolin. And then Eastern Beleriand is mostly the territory of the Sons of Feyenoor. So Dorthonion, or Tower Nafuin, we have Angrod and Aegnor, and those are the younger sons of Finarfin. Again, Finarfin had, I believe, four boys and Galadriel. So Finrod is in these two locations, and then the other two brothers are here. Galadriel stays in Doriath. She's in Menegroth because she makes friends with Melian. And because she has some Teleri blood, she's welcomed. Finrod is as well, but Doriath is very inhospitable toward the other Noldor. So then we have the Sons of Feyenoor. We have Celegorm and Curufin at the Pass of Aglon. Himring is where Maedhros is. Maglor is at Maglor's Gap, though he probably travels across the gap to Himring an awful lot. Then we have Caranthir up here at Rerir. and Lake Helivorn. And then down in this part, this wide open plain of eastern Beleriand, we have Amrod and Amras, the younger twins. The younger twin Sons of Feyenoor. Thank you so much for the fire. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. So that pretty much covers the majority of the map here. And I know that's an awful lot of names, but as we go through the rest of the story, it will rehash a lot of these different areas. Whenever they are important, I typically do pull out the map and actually show you guys what we're talking about. I'm a visual learner. I know I need those visuals. So the maps are difficult at first, but they do get easier with practice. So take a few minutes and just enjoy the maps if you have your own copy of the Silm. They're beautifully drawn. And this map was made by Christopher Tolkien, by the way. So, beautiful map. We are done with the chapter, and that means we can chill now. The re-recording is complete. You can now use the tab. The card at the top of the screen will take you to the next section. I do have that as a thing now. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Yes, Galadriel's mother is Eärwen. Eärwen is the daughter of Olwe, and he is the king of the Teleri over in Valinor. So she is half Teleri, and then on her father's side, because her father is Finarfin, Finarfin's mother is a Vanya elf, thus Finarfin has golden hair. He's blonde. He's blonde because he has Vanyar blood in his veins. And his father is Noldor. So Galadriel is a quarter Noldo, a quarter Vanya, and half Teleri. It gets confusing. This is why in one of my recent videos I mentioned that despite being part Noldo, usually considered a Noldor, one of the Noldor, the people of Doriath, after Thingol and Melian are gone, would probably, at least part of them, some of them would take her as one of their de facto leaders, along with Celeborn, because he's related to King Thingol. But part of the elves of Doriath are probably very bitter about the Noldor and wouldn't want to follow Galadriel. So that sect ends up following Orifer, which is Thranduil's father, and they end up over in Greenwood eventually. So I did make a video about that on my TikTok. Enjoy. I'll probably cross-post it onto YouTube as well. that is funny, Eli. First time you read Eärwen's name, you read it as earwax, and you died laughing for a good 20 minutes. That's a pretty funny misread. Trust me, it happened to me as well. I know for a while I kept getting all of the sea names confused. So Celegorm and Celeborn especially, I tended to get those two mixed up. Because visually they look very similar. Celegorm and Celeborn. Very, very different elves, though. So I would get myself into trouble with that. I especially got confused also because elves have multiple names. Every elf has at least 2 names, but typically closer to 4 or 5. Because of that, things get super confusing. So, Maedhros. Maedhros has 5 names, if I'm remembering correctly. Because he's got Maedhros, which is a combination of his mother name and one of his epices. So his father name is actually Neljafinwe. So Neljafinwe is his father name. His mother name is Maitimo, which means well-formed one. He's got that bod. One of his epices, or given names, his after names, is Rusendol, which means copper top, after his hair. And so Maedhros is a combination of Maitimo and Rusendol. That's how you get Maedhros. So that's 4 names. And then he's also called Maedhros the Tall. 5 names. Maedhros, Maitimo, Neliafinwe, and Rusendol. Yeah, that is correct. It's not so much an epicé, but he is called Maedhros the Tall. I still consider that a name. He's the tall one. He is the second tallest elf, I believe. If I remember correctly, he is the second tallest elf. The first tallest is King Thingol. Elwë. Elwë is the tallest elf on record. Don't ask me how tall that is. Bitch was probably like 9 foot or something crazy. The average height of the elves is talked about in the Nature of Middle-earth. I believe it was rarely were they under 6 feet. So typically 6 to 7 feet was the normal height range for an elf. So Maedhros was probably over 7 foot tall. Thingol probably like 7'5". Bonkers. Super tall. Tall as a tree, right? Legolas is described as being tall as a tree too. Tall as a young tree. So he's a sapling, he's a baby. He's still a baby. I almost think that they would call Legolas tall as a tree as like a joke. Yeah, you're tall as a tree, maybe a sapling. Like he's actually really short for an elf. That would be hilarious to me. Who's 9 foot tall and walking around like Evan's chilling. Thingol, that's who. Eru Thingol, or Elwë. But that basically, that sums up chapter 14. I hope everyone enjoyed that. I'm going to switch to the other view and we can chat a little longer. So hopefully this won't seem too out of place, since I had to re-record this chapter. Headcanon accepted. Right. I have a lot of headcanon. I have an unhealthy amount of headcanon, if it can even be called unhealthy. But that's because I spent 10 years writing fanfiction with my partner, so... 10 to 12 years? Hey there, baby tree. How are you doing today? Wouldn't it be hilarious if Haldir called him that? So, Legolas Thranduillion. But like a second later he's calling him, oh yeah, the one who's tall as a tree. To which Legolas is like, can you stop? Stop, please. Avo, please stop. I would pay money to see Haldir and the rest of the Galadrim like lay into Legolas about being short. It'd be hilarious. I would love that. Your ego would make you run away. Oh man. That's good stuff though. I'm excited. I'm starting to set things up for my ASMR streams too. So I do finally have my mic, my binaural microphone. So I can tippity-tappy the ears and whisper and do all the fun stuff. So I have the microphone, I have the mixer, I'm working on adding some sound effects that I can toggle on and off. And yeah, so I've got a lot of little tools to make, scritchy scratchy and tappy noises and music stuff, and I'm gonna have so much fun experimenting. I hope everyone enjoys that stuff when I do it. I've wanted to do ASMR for a while. I've wanted to do it for a couple years now. So only now am I getting the actual setup that I want in order to do it. Because you can do it with a Yeti Pro, but typically you want it mounted from the bottom, not on a boom arm like I have. Yeah, tippity tappy sounds. I have to experiment with it. I mean, I think I could turn it on. I think I could turn it on with you guys still here. Okay. I think you can hear that. It's very, very sensitive. Oh, okay. It's muted. It's muted on your end. Got it. Okay. We got this. Okay. So, you should be able to hear me in either ear. So yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait to mess with this more. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So isn't it nice? I'm so excited. No. Legolas would never be that short. Legolas, I don't think he would ever be to the point that like he's the same height as Gimli. I don't think so. I don't think it would get that bad. It'd be really funny though. Legolas. Alright, I'm gonna mute this. Okay. Alright. So, completely different audio experience. But no, Chibi Legolas would be super cute, but I could never see him being as short as a dwarf. Because dwarves are like 5 foot. And that's where I am. Dwarves are between like 4.5 and 5 feet, I believe. Right, I think their average height was 5 foot, and then it fluctuates a bit. I am the size of a dwarf, which is depressing. I'm super short. I'm super short, you guys. It's not even funny. It is kind of funny. Height of a dwarf. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with being the height of a dwarf. But if any elf were going to be teased for how short they are, it'd be me. It would totally be me. 100% am the short one. Ah, the throw on my bed. It's a 2 towers throw? I think 2 towers? No, it might be Return of the King, now that I'm thinking about it. It's Gimli and Legolas on horseback together. Gimli is, like, Rar, but Legolas is firing a bow. I think I found it like ages ago at like Spencer's? Spencer's Gifts? Does anyone go to Spencer's anymore? They used to carry a lot of geeky stuff like that. Spencer's used to be a place where I could grab that sort of shit. That and, oddly enough, Claire's. Like, you wouldn't think Claire's would have that sort of thing, but back in the day, they carried Spice Girl dolls, and they carried Lord of the Rings stuff. At least in my city, they did. But yeah, I got my blankets from a couple different places. I have that one, and then I have that one behind me on my bed, and then I have the one on my chair behind me here too. You can kind of see that it says Legolas. You can kind of see that it says Legolas, but that is an actual woven blanket, not like a printed blanket. Does that make sense? You're British. It doesn't help. I hear you. I totally hear you. I'm in the US. I'm in the USA. I'm an American. Oh, you got fake jewelry for your elf ears at Claire's? Nice. Nice. I do have the fake elf ears. I don't have them on right now, but last night I took a couple pictures to make new thumbnails. I made a thumbnail for Elvish ASMR. I'm really excited. I'm really excited to put that up there because I think it's a really pretty thumbnail. I think it's pretty. So, can't wait to share that. So tomorrow morning we will be doing actual Silmarillion Saturday. And that's tomorrow morning in Arizona, okay? Like, for those of you who are in the UK, it's gonna be like late afternoon. Late afternoon for y'all, okay? But it's still an okay time for you to tune in. Please follow my YouTube channel. Link in bio if you're still on TikTok. Follow my YouTube channel, that's where I stream. And, yeah, turn on the little notification bell or whatever. YouTube words. But I will be streaming tomorrow. We're going to be doing the last 2 chapters of the Quinta Silmarillion, and then after that I believe we'll have 2 more live streams. 2 more live streams, because we need to do the Akalabeth, which is about the fall of Numenor in the Second Age, and then we have Of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, so that's going to span a little of the Second Age, a little of the Third Age. So those will be 2 separate live streams unto themselves. So it's still part of the Silmarillion as a whole, but it's not the Quinta Silmarillion, which is what we have been reading for weeks. All of this stuff is in a playlist on my YouTube channel. Please check it out. Have fun with that. I did put cards up top, so that once I'm done reading the actual chapter, if you have it on your phone, you can look at the screen. There will be a card that you can tap on to skip you to the next one in the playlist. That way you don't have to listen to me chatting for like an extra hour for some of these streams. I really meander at the end. Oh yay, I'm so glad. Thank you, Rookie. That's really cool. Yeah, the Elvish pronunciations can be a little bit rough, but that's why I'm here. That's literally why I'm here. That's why I started my channel. I'm here to help with the Elvish. That's what I'm here for. Hi, my name is Kris. I speak Elvish. I'm not fluent. Don't get on me about fluency because I'm still relearning, okay? But I'm very excited, and I did just have the release of my Elvish song with Cammy Cat. So for those of you who want to hear an entire Elvish song, Cammy Cat just released the Song of Elturel. She did the English version, and then she hired me to translate it into its original Elvish. It is a D&D song. So Descent into Avernus, I believe, is the module. But it's a D&D campaign, so. Oh, sing a song of Elturel. Which in Elvish is Olino Lairo Elturel. I'm working on my trills. I'm really looking forward to Morfydd Clark. Oh my gosh, Morfydd Clark. Because she's Welsh, her Sindarin is just because Sindarin was based off of Welsh. So anyone who can speak actual Welsh is going to be like really good at Sindarin. I can't wait to listen to her talk in Elvish more. I'm such a fanboy. Oh my gosh. And to think Morfydd Clark owns a piece of my merch. My merch with Dawn. It's the same you all are welcome here in Elvish with the ears. I know of two people. Two people on the cast of Rings of Power actually own that. So, I'm excited. It's really cool. Nice. Yeah, do some enunciation. It's always good practice. Just, try not to completely annoy your friends. But I find it really helpful when people correct me when I'm saying a name wrong, right? Like, I don't want to say people's names wrong. So I'm usually okay with them being like, hey, it's Celeborn, not Celeborn. Just putting it out there. It's Caras Galavon. The DH is a V sound. Oh, hi, kitten. Hello? What are you doing? Come here. Come here. Yeah, come here. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Alright. Oh, okay. I've just been catted. I'm gonna be here a while. Couldn't go to work, had a cat on my lap. She is demanding. So say hello to Alana, everybody. This is my kitten bit. She's a dilute tortie. She's a sweet girl, but she likes to come out right when I start streaming. Why do you do that, kitten? Is it because I'm talking? Do I need to start talking and singing more in the house so you get used to it? I could. I live by myself now. I don't live with my father anymore. It was a temporary thing because of the pandemic. I will be spending, I think, a couple solid weeks with my dad, though, because he needs surgery relatively soon, so that will be happening. When it happens, I will let y'all know so that we, know which weeks we're going to be skipping Silmarillion Sunday or whatever streaming I end up doing. Okay. Ooh, you stinky. You're a stinky girl today. Move, please. Good girl. Thank you. She's a sweet cat. But yes, Lord of the Rings marathons are always fun. I actually need to, you guys will not believe this. You will not believe this. I bet you won't. I have never seen the extended edition of the first Hobbit film. Not once. I've never seen it. I've never seen the extended edition. So I need to purchase the extended editions of the Hobbit films. I don't even like the Hobbit films, personally. Not to my taste. They deviated a little too much for my liking. I think all of the problems that I have with The Hobbit could have been solved by unreliable narrator. All you needed to do was have a scene with an older Bilbo telling the story to a younger Frodo, like Princess Bride style. Is this another kissing book? Is this a kissing book? No, it's not a kissing book. There's all this stuff happening. And then the barrels just bounced around and the dwarves were fine and they weren't hurt by the molten liquid metal in the forges of Erebor. No, everything was fine. It's fine. Because Frodo would have been like, Uncle Bilbo, you can't be serious. And be like, no, that's exactly how it happened. Then it means that anything that seemed out of the ordinary or like too farcical to be real would have been explained away by an unreliable narrator that Bilbo is just embellishing. I feel like that would have been a brilliant way of fixing it. But, you know, whatever. I'm just a published author with no fan base whatsoever. It's true. No one reads my books. It's because it's all, you know, queer erotica. Loosely tied together fantasy. I try to keep things tasteful, but I'm very kink positive and I'm very sex positive. So yeah, I have a lot of headcanon, but a lot of it tends to be on the erotic side. But no, it's true. It's true. I've never seen the extended editions. And I really should. I really should. I feel like I would at least appreciate things a bit more. I love the movies are still beautiful, okay? Like, I'm not mad at them over that. Visually, they're still stunning. I'd like to have a chat with Fran and Philippa and Peter Jackson and be like, really, guys, really, like, was this just a circle jerk where you all just said, yeah, it's good, move on. It's fine. It's fine. It's a yes. It's a yes from me. I feel like they didn't hear enough no. But also, I understand the context in which the Hobbit films were made. The Hobbit films were made like super duper fast, because they had over a year of pre-production that was scrapped when the original director left. Del Toro was supposed to be the director originally. When he left the project, you know, they begged Peter Jackson to come back and, like, please just make it happen somehow. And so he had not enough time and you know, just really not enough time, because even if you had a huge budget, at that point, if you don't have the time to actually do pre-production, where you're making all the props, you're making all the costumes, you're making, you know, all of the surrounding sets and bigatures and all the stuff that they made for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, if they had the time, that's where the budget would have gone. But they didn't have the time, so the budget went to special effects to try and fill in that gap, because they didn't have the time to do all of the high-level crafting that we got with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, because they had scrapped all the pre-production from Del Toro, Guillermo del Toro. So it was a bad time. It was a bad time. So I understand that, and that's why, like, while I don't like the Hobbit trilogy personally, I can still enjoy it for what it is. Scrapped as in they threw it out. All of the pre-production that happened when Guillermo del Toro was the director had to be scrapped. They had to throw it all out. Because his visualization and concept for everything was different from Peter Jackson's, which would have been fine. Honestly, I would have loved to have seen what he did with it. I think it would have been closer to the tone of the actual Hobbit book, which is much more younger audience oriented. It doesn't take itself as seriously as The Lord of the Rings does. It's a completely different tone. But when they brought Peter Jackson back in, they tried to make The Hobbit look, sound, and feel like Lord of the Rings. And I think that was a bad decision. I think it being separate would have been a better thing. And that's why I keep a really open mind when it comes to the Rings of Power. Because, you know, a departure from Peter Jackson is okay. The tone of the Second Age is different than the tone of the Third Age. You know, these are different time periods. I'm okay with there being differences in approach, right? Adaptations are meant to be different. They're not all meant to be cohesive. So I am not at all, you know, getting on Amazon for having a different take. I expected a different take. I also have dismally low expectations, so that kind of helps. I don't have huge expectations. I have high hopes, but I don't have huge expectations. You know, worst case scenario, the whole thing sucks, and I end up making content anyway about how it sucks. and what I would have done differently, or suggestions for the next adaptation, because there's always going to be a next adaptation. There always is going to be a next one. until the human race dies out, we are not going to stop retelling our favorite stories. How many Spider-Mans are there now? How many Spider-Mans? You know what I'm saying. How many Batmans? We retell in the same story, right? Different takes, same story, same characters. So I am a-okay with an adaptation by Amazon being whatever it ends up being. I personally am very much for the inclusion of people of color, hopefully some queerness. I would love to see Celebrimbor Anatar. But you know, like I'm not gonna get on people about it, like whether it's good or bad or otherwise. I'm just gonna enjoy it for what it is. High hopes, low expectations. Exactly. I think it's a really healthy place to be when it comes to stuff like this. Like, I have high hopes. It would be great if this is amazing. We get content anyways. Yep, you're gonna hear me talking about it no matter what, so strap in. Parf Evelyn. I use it all the time. Parf Evelyn? I use it all the time. Now, it doesn't give you a clear vision all the time of, like, the roots and whether, you know, a specific word in Elvish is of the right time period to be used with other words. Like, it doesn't always give you a full picture of the Elvish, but it's a great resource, nonetheless. If you know how to construct sentences in Sindarin, it's a fount of knowledge. And they do, I know someone in my live streams, typically over on Twitch, I think they tend to watch me from Twitch, Gilrine? Or Gildwin? Gilrine? I think it was Gilrine. I'm gonna kick myself if I got their name wrong. Sorry. Sorry, sir, ma'am, y'all. But they are constantly correcting my Elvish, and I'm all for it. I'm all for it. If I screw up Elvish, I want to be corrected. I don't take it personally. Yeah, Parf Evelyn, with a double L. If you Google Parf Evelyn, it will bring you to elfdict.com, like Elf Dictionary. ELFDICT. Elfdict. So it's basically a dictionary, but they've basically compiled all the information from a bunch of other dictionaries. Like, I used to use the Ardalambian stuff from Helga Falskanger. I tended to use his stuff, but his dictionary was mostly in French. Like, at one point it changed entirely into French, and because I don't speak French, I was like, oh no. But they've basically done their best to compile a bunch of stuff from Eldamo and Hiswaloke. That's the one I tend to use. Hiswaloke. Hiswaloke and Ardalambian. Those were the resources that I tended to use the most often. And so when everything gets pulled together, you get sort of a snapshot, a pretty good snapshot, of what words you can and shouldn't use. But I'm not the person who has delved into the whole ancient roots of all of these words, and therefore how things should mutate or not mutate, depending on ancient roots. That's the one place in Sindarin that I am woefully inexperienced. Ancient roots throw me off every time. But I'm trying, and that's the important thing. Looking to improve. Like, I'm resident elf boy, okay? I'm not, like, elvish linguistic professor. I don't claim to be an expert. I claim to be an uber fan, okay? Like, I'm a big-time fan. But I am in no way an expert. I have expertise, but I don't feel that I'm a huge expert. because I'm still learning. It's an ongoing process for me. I hope people understand that. And it's not false humility. Like, I know that I am not the best out there. My focus is Sindarin only because I haven't had the time to study Quenya yet. I want to, but I haven't yet. Hi, kitten. Please don't flash your butthole. She's like, what are you doing? How dare? What? I know. I'll sign off and then you can have all the cuddles you want. I need to go. But no, Quenya I haven't really studied much, and it's just because I haven't had the time. I haven't had the time. I'm still studying Sindarin. I am taking notes. I got note cards here. Note cards. I'm on lesson 6 at the moment, taking down extra notes. And this is me basically taking Fiona Jalling's course bit by bit. She has allowed me to see the second draft of her book, which is completely organized differently than the first draft of her book, the first edition of her book, which is A Fan's Guide to Neo-Sindarin, published in 2017. Probably the most updated recent iteration of Elvish lessons out there. But she keeps her website up to date. She's an amazing person. She's just very introverted, and I'm extroverted, so I asked her permission to basically adapt her lessons into audio-visual lessons, because I wish that there had been video files that I could have listened to someone speaking it, instead of having to learn the hard way. But I'm a very visual kinesthetic learner, so I would have loved to have had that resource, and so I'm going to become that resource for other people, hopefully, maybe. Be kind. And things won't be perfect, but I'm trying to record things in a way that if I need to update them later, I can. I want to make things modular in a way that I can update things if necessary, correct mistakes I might make along the way, but I want to give everyone a basic Elvish course that they can take for free, and then if they want something with more depth, they can buy Fiona's book, and with her book as a guide, I might make my own study guide, and then we can do some more in-depth exercises and conversations and stuff like that. I would love to do that. So that's the long-term goal, and that's why I have a website, which is elfboy.com, elf-boi.com. If you go there, it'll pop up with a little join my newsletter thing. Join the newsletter. Whenever I have major news, I will send an email out to the newsletter. Other than major news, I don't send emails, so you don't have to worry about spam. It's never going to happen. Not from me. I'm too lazy to send a bunch of emails, guys. So unless I have, like, a major product launch or the Sindarin lessons have begun, you won't get emails from me otherwise, so join the mailing list. There's no harm in that. There's no competition for the role of Quenya Elf Girl. I mean, not at the moment. Yeah, Quenya's not my forte. I can speak it if it's in front of me, but it's not my forte. But it's just because I know it's a glutinative and I haven't learned all the rules. I would love to, though. At some point soon, I'm going to. But I think we're going to call this to an end. Thank you for hanging out with me, guys. I will see you tomorrow morning for the final chapters 23 and 24, I believe, of the Quenta Silmarillion. So we're going to finish the Silm tomorrow. Be prepared, it will be a slightly longer than normal live stream. But I will see you guys there. Everybody, please take care. I love you guys. I'll let you guys know when I'm doing my ASMR streams too, so keep an eye out for those. Bye, everybody.